Wow, after Khalid, I don't know what to say. Interesting that I have to come all the way from Israel to Australia to meet my brother Israeli that I never met before and find out that we write in the same newspaper. I think that was fascinating, thought-provoking, and I'm still thinking if maybe that changes my mind about a lot of stuff in Israel and the Middle East. I just think it's a good recommendation that we should always open our minds to things like this and help it to shape our perspective. What Khalid said reminded me something that Professor Dan Shiftan from Haifa University told me once. He said, if you ask the average Israeli, do you want peace? He'll say, yes. Do you dream and aspire to peace as a nation? Yes. Are you willing to make concessions for peace? Yes. Are you willing to give back parts of your ancient homeland? Yes. Are you willing to take security risks for peace? Yes. And do you think you'll have peace? Of course not. So basically, as far as the peace process, the bottom line, I totally agree. I'm very excited because in about an hour I get to wear jeans and go back to Israel. I've been here for a little more than a week. I'm thankful for the UIA for bringing me. Second time in Australia, second time in Melbourne. And it's just wonderful. And I have to say that from my humble perspective, what you accomplished here, and I'm speaking especially to Holocaust survivors here, what you have accomplished here is just incredible. You can hear from my English, I'm originally from the United States, and I've visited many communities, Jewish communities around the world. I'm amazed and inspired from what I see here. As far as Jewish identity and community, connection to Israel is something I've never seen anything like it in the world. And Jewish education, I think I'm going to try to send my kids here next year maybe. Extraordinary. Khalid talked about peace and prosperity. So my previous commander, Major General Gershon Cohen, used to say, if it was about peace and prosperity, we would move to Canada. So I'm changing it now. If it was about peace and prosperity, I would move to Australia. I want to talk to you about national security. This is something I learned in my last job in the National Defense College. Fascinating issue, and I found out that most Israelis don't know what national security means, and I want to talk about that a bit. First, we disagree on almost every issue. I mean, if we have some politicians here and we talk about climate change, do we agree about climate change? No, it's usually not science, but more a political issue. Almost every issue on the table we disagree. Even like when I go to the United States, it's of course scientific issues are completely political. And if you talk about abortions, and if you talk about even human space exploration, we'll always be divided. And there is no one truth, actually. Also, when you look at Israel and the Middle East, I find that there's almost nothing that we can say we all agree upon. Not only the issues we talked here, but even higher issues of national security. The very definition of Israel as a Jewish state, many Israelis may think that this is something in consensus, but it is not. Especially with Khalid sitting here, let me ask myself, am I willing to say Israel is a Jewish state? Yeah, what about Khalid? That's why I personally disagree with the terminology that Israel is a Jewish state. I believe we should say that Israel is a democracy of all its citizens, and one of its founding principles is being the nation state of the Jewish people. And I'm not saying it only because Khalid is here, I say this everywhere. But this just shows how we are divided, and some people, even our prime minister now, will say, no, that's a key issue, and I demand that the Palestinians declare that we are a Jewish state as a precondition to begin negotiations. Other Israelis will say, that's ridiculous, you can't ask them to define you. Just showing you that this is another interesting point of division on one of the key issues of our very existence. And we could go on with basic issues in Israel, like having a constitution. We don't have a constitution. With my original American background, that sounds ridiculous, but many Israelis, especially religious, will say we have the constitution, the Torah. National security issues, let's take Iran. That's always popular. You would think that that's easy. Yeah, Iran is an existential threat and aspiring to achieve nuclear weapons. Wait a minute. We have a big debate if Iran will actually be an existential threat if they achieve a nuclear weapon. Some people, okay, it's true that a nuclear weapon is an existential threat, but don't use the word existential too much because it's creating too much fear. I mean, some people actually claim that our government, their policy now is to talk a lot about existential threats and about hundreds of thousands of rockets in the region, and they shouldn't be frightening us so much. A very simple debate. If the Iranians acquire a nuclear weapon, will they press the button? Yes or no? I believe no. I think I'm a minority in Israel, but I also believe that our policy should be assuming that they will. So this goes to the debate, should Israel, if the Iranians are dashing towards achieving a nuclear weapon, if our intelligence says they're going for it, in 2 weeks they have a bomb, should Israel attack? Again, we're divided. Personally, I believe yes. And I believe when our Prime Minister says that all options are on the table, one of the options is attacking. Some people say that because we all know that we can't wipe out all the nuclear capabilities and we're only talking about postponing it, and attack will initiate or ignite an all-out war in the Middle East. Maybe that's the wrong thing to do. Again, divided, spectrum of ideas, all legitimate, and I believe everyone that has an opinion should at least look at the other opinion as if it's a legitimate school of thought. Personally, I believe that we can never allow the Iranians to achieve a nuclear weapon, whatever it takes. Whatever it takes, and when I say whatever it takes, I know what it means. It means an all-out war in the Middle East, and it's going to be tough. But in 100 years, we're going to look back, it's just going to be another one of those wars along the way of our struggle, and I'm not that worried. So I'm not talking, I'm very optimistic, okay? But this is one more key issue that I think we're divided on. Let's take another issue, borders. If we go to a peace accord with the Palestinians, and personally, even though I agree with Khaled, I dream and hope that we do achieve some kind, I'm not going to call it peace, but some kind of agreement that will allow a few years of quiet, stability. I think stability is the key issue here. And we all know what we're talking about. We're talking about the 1967 borders with corrections, with land swaps. So we're pretty much talking about Route 6. If you visited Israel recently, you know what I'm talking about. Route 6, the Green Line. Personally, I believe that's a border that you cannot defend. And I believe that even if we have a good partner on the other side, the Palestinian Authority, I don't think they will be able to prevent terror attacks coming across the border. I think Ben Gurion is going to get a Katyusha rocket or mortars once in a while, and I think eventually we'll go back into a clash. But still, personally, the spectrum is here. From side to side, I'm somewhere in the middle. I say that if we can go for it, we should, but the issue of borders, understanding borders, and the geopolitical meaning is very critical. Our president, President Shimon Peres, I admire him for many things, but usually object to many practical things he talks about. He says that borders mean nothing anymore because our mind has no borders. You know, Shimon Peres is a theory. It's amazing to listening to him, but when you talk about borders, to say that borders mean nothing in this day and age, I think that's a mistake. Look at the Golan Heights. It looks imaginary now, but do you think someday we'll be able to give back the Golan Heights to the Syrians, to a stable Syria for peace? And what if I promised you that that will give us another 40 years of tranquility in the north? Should we give back the Golan? Why not? Just a plateau of basalt. So we'll lose a few vineyards. I say absolutely not, for two reasons. One, because it's ridiculous, because they held it for 20 years after it was arbitrarily allocated to them in 47, after swapping hands between France and England and then Syria, and then they held it for 20 years and they were attacking us and bothering us all the time. So we took it from them, held it for 40 years, and history took its course, and forget it. But the second reason, you know, we could argue about the first. Just the first is because it's simply ridiculous, but the second is that borders and who holds the high ground was true 2,000 years ago, and it still is today. But here again, I must say, this is an issue to be debated. So some people today say, look what's happening in Syria, look at the civil war. Can you imagine if we would have given back the Golan Heights and all that was happening over the Sea of the Galilee now, that would have been a catastrophe. And again, others from the school of thought of maybe our president say that in 2014, with all our electronic systems and early warning and the Americans and NATO, we will be able to create a situation where the border passes doesn't exactly matter. So I told you where I stand, but I also must always, this is a key factor in what I'm telling you today, is respect that we have a spectrum of opinions, okay? There's almost never right and wrong. So my conclusion that the truth is that there is no truth, but it's more than that. It's most issues, it's not like it's something scientific there that I can just go and measure. I find that usually we are using the wrong tools, the wrong yardsticks, the wrong, or sometimes not the wrong, but the different set of values. And so each one of us comes and he sees different things. Khaled talked about peace and prosperity. Let's address that again. When the Americans come now to address the issue of peace in the Middle East, many Israelis believe, oh, they're against Israel, they're pro-Palestine. I think that's ridiculous. Not only because I work with the Americans and I am officially the liaison to the U.S. Embassy during wartime. This is a closed forum. You're not going to tell them what I tell you, right? I believe them. I believe that this administration and the president and John Kerry are pro-Israel and they're our friends and they mean well. I believe that personally. But I believe that they're coming with a ruler that has inches, and we use the metric system in the Middle East. So they measure it, and just like the Mars rover that once crashed on Mars because they used the wrong calibration, in a way the Americans are doing a similar thing, because their reasoning would usually be very simple. What do we all want? We all want peace and prosperity and a better future for our children. And since that's what we all want, let's make derivatives of that and now work on it. Yeah, but the first assumption is wrong, because the Palestinians don't want peace and prosperity. They want their country to throw us back into the sea or back to Poland and Russia, where my family came from originally. And I'm not saying that the Israelis want peace and prosperity and the Palestinians, these crazy Palestinians, they're fanatics. I say we're fanatics too. Also, we don't want peace and prosperity. That's not our ultimate goal. Our ultimate goal is sustaining Israel as the homeland of the Jewish people, as a vibrant democracy for another 1,000 years. That's why I'm not moving to Canada, okay? Or to Australia, I'm sorry. So, talked about all these things that we're divided on, but here we found one issue, one basic issue that maybe we can all agree, all of us. Now, I was warned about this, but I will take 60 seconds to talk to you about Parashat HaShavua, the portion of the week. I'm looking at your faces now to see if I lost you. 60 seconds, I promise. This is the last portion in a few that's talking about the Mishkan, the tabernacle, building of the tabernacle. And Moses called all the children of Israel and says, please donate as much as you possible. Gold, silver, copper, skins, cloth. You know where I'm getting at with this, don't you? Yeah, that's pretty obvious. Don't forget, I don't work for the UIA, okay? They didn't tell me what to say. So they started donating and gave the job to Bezalel, this master craftsman, wise man. Notice how many times women are mentioned in these parashot. Men and women, women and men, and wisdom. A lot of wisdom went into this building, but at a certain point, Moses had to tell the Jewish people, please stop with your donations. There are too many raw materials. Now that's funny because UIA would never tell you, please, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Please refrain from donating this year. But still, getting back to my main point, why did the Jewish people have this overwhelming response? Probably because they understood that this is something that is a national project, that they're all uniting to contribute to something great, to something that unites them, to a national goal. And they wanted to contribute, they wanted to be part of this national goal. So there's my point, and I'm stopping to talk about Parashat Shavua. Working on Israel and building Israel, and I may have lived in Israel for 25 years, but I don't feel more Israeli than you, and Israel doesn't belong to me more than you. It's our combined project, and at least we have something that we all agree upon that we can promote. And what borders and what identity, we talked about it. We can differ on that, but the basic issue of Israel's national security, that we agree. But wait a minute, even the terminology, even the term national security, I told you we disagree upon. There are a few interesting things like that we think they're basic in our day-to-day being, but they are not. Like terrorism. Do we agree what terrorism is? We disagree worldwide, not in Israel, what terrorism is and what a terrorist means. National security. The first week of National Defense College in Israel, students come in, they're senior colonels, amazing leaders from all over, and they are asked, what is national security? Take a piece of paper and write it. And what they learn in the course of a year is that national security is much more than physical defense and military might. It is economic power, diplomacy. We Israelis many times forget that diplomacy is a great tool. And by the way, diplomacy should be used first. Military, of course, is something you want to use only when you don't have a choice. Political power, energy security, environment, etc. But when you go and you read, even open Wikipedia today and see what it says under national security, you'll find that it misses the most important component of national security, and that is the society, national resilience, the strength of our community. Not only because of the threats in the Middle East. Again, I'm not only talking about security, because the next war is going to see thousands of rockets coming into Israel. Soldiers on the border might have it quiet, but they're going to get a text message from back home because the neighborhood's being hit with rockets from all over. So not only because of physical threats, our nation, our people have to be strong and resilient, but because building a strong nation means much more than survival. I believe that national security for Israel means being a vibrant, strong democracy that is a light upon the nations, and I don't mean this condescendingly. I really believe that Israel should be a light to the world, We do it some now, but notice that today we're talking about Iran and security and Palestinians, and not about my favorite topics, drip irrigation, agriculture, organic farming, natural pollination. We're doing all that, computer chips. So I believe that our national project today, the most important and critical component of our national security, is our society. And here I'm ending my speech with saying that the strength of our society is measured by the strength of our youth, our next generation, which means that education is the #1 issue we should address now in Israel's national security. And this is why I'm proud to come here on behalf of UIA and tell you that the projects that UIA deals with in Israel, all the spectrum of projects they do, are addressing, and this is strange coming from a helicopter pilot. This lecture could have been about my heroic missions across the border and all the things I did, and I'm coming to tell you that talking about Israel national security, it's education, it's projects like UIA, it's integrating of the new immigrants, especially the youth, into the Israeli society, and not losing them, because the projects of UIA, as I see it, are giving opportunities to people that without these projects will miss this opportunity. We might miss a generation. And we need to work very hard so these young people grow up to make us into this strong nation. Today, the new weapon of choice, if you're talking about military, is keyboard. And the keyboard should be used, or can be used also for a lot of civilian applications to make us a leading nation in all these other things, in science and technology and space exploration. Israel should be very involved in climate change and research and influence that. And that's why I want to thank you all and say that we are all together contributing to these programs, contributing directly to the most important component, the most important project in Israel's national security. Thank you very much.
Does anyone have any questions for Reuven? Any questions?
You made it easy on me.
Did I make it easy? We have a question.
Hi, a bit of a strange question. I'm not Jewish. And
nobody's perfect.
And I was talking recently to an Iranian ex-Muslim, and he was saying that the West does not understand Iran, that many of them actually hate the Islamic regime that's being forced on them, but they love their country, and that there's been an attempt to claim Islam and nationalism as the same thing. The people want to resist this. I'm just asking you if there's any feeling in Israel that there may well be a big growth of younger Iranians that may in fact end up overthrowing the intensely Islamic government that's there at the moment.
I think that's the big dream that we have. I think that would be the best outcome, and there's a lot of talk about that in Israel, that it's not going to be some all-out war that we're going to beat them and then they're going to say, okay, you win. I mean, that's never going to happen. And it will be a change from within. It's also important for me to emphasize that many Israelis don't hate Iranians. I mean, I don't hate Iranians. I think Iranians are amazing people with a proud heritage and history coming from the United States. When I speak to Iranians and Chinese, by the way, I say they're those new guys that are just around for a couple hundred years. You know, we know what we're talking about. We've been around for thousands of years. I respect them. I wish we could live with them in peace and harmony. That's why I usually refer to, I didn't do it today because I didn't want to irritate you too much. I usually refer to the Palestinians as my Palestinian brothers and sisters. I mean, people that are exercising terrorism, I should kill them, but all the rest I respect. And I believe that together we could have a wonderful coexistence and enriched Israeli and Middle East culture. The same as I relate to Israeli Arabs that live inside Israel is something that enriches our culture. This is one of our secrets of being a vibrant community with all these cultures together. So in the National Defense, I'll just end by saying the National Defense College, one of the biggest classes we teach is understanding the other and respecting the other. It's not only about enemies that you need to kill, it's about the other that we need to understand him and appreciate him and respect him.
Well then, we got one more question. Natalie, any more questions? Just one more.
I read that President Bush sent a letter to Sharon in which he suggests that the evacuation of Gaza will bring the result, and all in Gaza could live the refugee from 48, 49, but I never find in any paper this letter. Could you tell about that?
I don't think I'm going to answer your question directly. I'll say that I think Israelis attach too much importance to letters. We always say, wait a minute, in his speech he used this word, he used that word. Wait a minute, he didn't say this, he didn't say that. It's like when people address the Knesset and somebody walks out in the middle because of this word and that word, including with letters. The truth is, I don't know what letter was sent to Ariel Sharon. I don't think it has any historic significance. And I think Israelis attach too much importance to what one specific president says. That's why when people question me about President Obama and what does he think and what does he want, and I say, you know, in a few years, who's President Obama? It's not a matter of this president or that president. We should see it in a wider context. But bottom line about the disengagement, I will say that I don't judge the disengagement as far as success or failure by what we've seen so far. People argue about it. You see, this proves that it was a mistake because Hamas took over, etc. And I say, I will give you an answer about it in 100 years. Again, using the scale, the historic scale, I will look back and then I will tell you. Bottom line, I respect Ariel Sharon for moving the wheel forward, even though we are very divided on if that was the right move to make. That's all I can say. I know I didn't answer you directly, and I apologize. Thank you.